Hello to everyone. It's time for the webinar series De-Westernizing Media Literacy, Perspectives on Pedagogies, Practices and Theories of Media Education. Welcome to this webinar, which will be focusing on media literacy in Sub-Saharan Africa. This webinar series is a continuation of two previous webinar series, one that started by focusing on the Nordic countries, Finland, Denmark and Norway, and another that presented an outlook on 8 European countries. And now in this webinar series, our ambition is to widen our perspective by looking at regions beyond the Nordics and Europe. And that's the starting point for de-Westernizing. And de-Westernizing in this context means asking how to remain cultural sensitive when forming theories, practices and policies about media literacy, also deconstructing our own conceptions about media literacy and the related theory. We are talking about either media literacy or media and information literacy, MIL. My name is Maarit Jaakkola and I'm the co-director of Nordicom, a center for Nordic media research at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden, and I'll be your host today. Today, as in all our webinars, we will be able to listen to 3 presentations, each 10 minutes long. And after each presentation, we'll have a little time for questions and answers. And you can always leave your questions to the chat box and we'll pick them up from there. Let me introduce you our first speaker. He comes from Kenya, so we'll start from the eastern part of Africa. He's Wallace Chichunge. I'm sorry about the pronunciation. He's the founder and executive director of Nairobi-based Center for Media and Information Literacy in Kenya, CMIL Kenya. And this is a non-profit organization supporting MIL initiatives in Kenya and Africa in more general. Wallace is a communications expert and a media and information literacy practitioner with over 10 years of experience in journalism and corporate communications practice and consultancy. He has also been training people in journalism and mass communications and public relations, and he has been active within the Unesco collaboration within MIL. So please, Wallace, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Maarit, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this very important webinar. As it is, we say at CMIL Kenya that our main job is to play a part. PRT, where P is for partnerships, A is for advocacy and awareness creation, R is for research and resource mobilization, as well as resource development, and the T is for training and capacity development. So this is part of what we do. Anywhere where MIL is being spoken about or being discussed, either in Africa, in Kenya, or wherever, we are always glad to participate. I also wish to thank the previous presenters on the Afro media. These are some ideas that we've been having. Just the other day, a group of communication scholars from Africa have started a WhatsApp group. I think Monica might be aware of it. Where people are trying to at least bring their heads together and see what collaborative efforts they can yield towards the development not only of our careers but also of what we do, so that we can achieve better outcomes. So my brief today is to give an overview of the media and information literacy initiative in Kenya. I would start by saying that from a very general perspective, media information literacy is work in progress, especially in the continent of Africa, where it is quite fledgling. It's very new as opposed to the other continents in the West, Western part of the world, that is the North America and the Europe, where some of these initiatives have really taken root. So most of the activities that we have been doing in terms of MIL has been from the UNESCO perspective, where I've taken, I'm sorry, I'm not able to share the screen because I'm using my mobile phone. The network in my office is quite bad. So I'll just look at my screen here. I'll share later on after I've spoken. So we look at the UNESCO definition of media information literacy, where we look at some of these issues that understanding the role and function of media and other information providers in democratic societies, the critical aspects of the critical evaluation of information and the content of media and other information providers, including those on the internet in terms of authority, credibility, and current purpose. Then there is the ethically and responsibly communication, the ethical aspects of communication. Then the ability to apply ICT skills in order to process information and produce user-generated content, and also engaging with media and other information providers, including those on the internet for self-expression, freedom of expression, and intercultural dialogue. So in Kenya, we have had quite a number of initiatives since we started as Center for Media Information Literacy in Kenya. To begin with, we were the first guys that did the background paper on the media information literacy policy and strategy for the country. Due to lack of resources, we handed it over to the Media Council of Kenya, who have taken part of it because they are funded by the government. They are part of a government agency. So they have taken up that initiative of developing the policy and strategy for the country. And they have been able to engage parliamentarians, members of parliament, and the parliamentary committee that deals with the communication and the information. First of all, they did some capacity building of those members of parliament, and then the process for the policy has begun in earnest. But as you know, Kenya is now at an election year, so most likely this is going to be taken up once the elections are concluded in August later in the year. So the Media Council of Kenya is one of the agencies that have done a lot of media information literacy in Kenya, especially on that particular aspect of media information literacy policy and strategy. Of course, they also do other capacity building, especially within their mandate of their targeted audiences, that is practitioners in journalism and media. Then we have the Minister of Information and Communication Technology, which is basically the duty bearer in terms of media and information literacy. This is a ministry that is actually even pushing the policy aspect and development. We have other players, Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. We have the Communication Authority, who are currently working on something to do with the child online safety. And then we have other agencies like a Kenyan Institute of Curriculum Development. This one deserves a special mention because we at CMIL Kenya collaborated with them and developed a media information literacy curriculum for teachers in Kenya. That was in 2019. This was adapted from the meal curriculum from Unesco and then contextualized for the Kenyan teachers. Now, training of Kenyan teachers, especially for the primary schools, have been stopped as they review the curriculum. So we are assuming that, and we are hoping rather, that this meal curriculum that we developed with KSCD will be taken up. Another good news is that the Teachers Employer Teachers Service Commission of Kenya has also come up with a teachers professional development program where teachers are supposed to attend a 1 or 2 week course every year, sponsored by the government, and we are trying to push so that this meal curriculum is part of that teacher development career, professional development course. Then other initiatives that we've been able to do at CML Kenya has been youth leaders capacity building, where we have educated, rather trained more than 60 youth leaders from about 5 youth groups across the country, and they have been able to mainstream male in their activities. Of course, we have also trained media practitioners, journalists, and other content providers on media information literacy, and all these efforts have been sponsored by UNESCO through their office in Eastern Africa. The recent one was the adaptation of media information literacy in university curricula, especially one university took on board. I think they were reviewing their journalism training. University is called Rongo University in western part of the country. These ones, after the review of the curriculum and our initiative with the Media Council and the Unesco, they were able to mainstream media information literacy at all levels up to the PhD level. Then most recently, as CML Kenya, with support from Unesco, again, we were able to launch a network of media information literacy stakeholders and practitioners in the country, what we call the Kenyan Alliance. What other initiatives do we have? Corporate sponsored digital literacy programs. We are seeing an uptick, rather an uptick of, what do you call it? So corporate and big tech companies are coming in to chip in the digital literacy programs championed by the government. We have people like Google, Facebook or Meta. We have Microsoft, Mastercard Foundation, Huawei, etc. All these are coming up in disparate areas and pushing for digital literacy in collaboration with various agencies and other actors. And the other efforts we can see from civil society organizations like Africa Check, who are a fact check organization, the Youth Cafe, for example, targeting youth and other audiences. So on our way forward for meal in Kenya, we are trying to finalize the development of the meal policy and strategy in Kenya, as I mentioned, and this we are looking forward to that once Parliament resumes after the campaigns on the election. Then we also want to strengthen the Kenyan Alliance and seek for more collaboration both at the regional and international levels, so that you can push for more meal and targeted meal initiatives. And lastly, meal capacity building, targeting organized groups such as the Library Association, the Scouts and Guides movement, and other cohort training, so that we can permeate media information literacy to the organized groups. To conclude, I think my time is over. I would want to mention that in trying to decolonize from the theme that Barit mentioned, decolonizing media information literacy in Africa. First of all, we have seen the Afro media. We have been thinking with some friends of mine, some from Uganda, of an Afro male approach. So there is Afro media here. For ours, we have an Afro male approach. What has now that media information literacy is an international concept, but with very local context. What is the local context for media information literacy in Africa? I think this will be unraveled by this network in Africa, so that we don't just copy and paste what is happening elsewhere, but we contextualize ours and run away with it for better and more impactful outcomes. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Wallis. Very interesting, and I do agree that it's very important to highlight the local conditions and to try to understand them. It's equally important for those who are involved in the scene to understand what are we, what is our identity, what are we made of, to be able to develop it further, and also for those who are looking upon you from an external perspective. So as you were referring to Afromedia Network, for example, we really hope that that will become an important resource for you. But talking about resources, you also mentioned the UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Model Curriculum, and how it has to be adapted to the local conditions. I would be interested in this work with the model curriculum, not the least because I have been involved in writing the newest version of the model curriculum. It's always very hard to find a global perspective and something that would be valuable both for the North and the South. So what do you think, how easy it is to adopt the model curriculum to the local conditions in your region and your country? What are the biggest challenges of contextualizing this kind of globally made knowledge?
Thank you for that question, Marit. I think first we need to accept that the need for media information literacy cannot be gainsaid. Like the famous professor, I forget his name, said, it's now a global village. So the conditions, there are quite a number of similarities in terms of the exposure to technology, for example, the information overload, what do we call it? The disinformation and misinformation, especially during the COVID-19. So basically, it is everybody needs media information literacy. So that is the first approach, accepting that there is a gap and there is need for this. Now, at least Unesco has galvanized experts from across the globe. I am also part of the people who contributed to the new curriculum. And when I look at it, I see that it has expertise from across the globe. So there are aspects. It's a global kind of a curriculum. So it has a snippet of local context in every part of the world. So but the main challenge is to what extent on when we look at some of the outcomes that we have envisaged. So to what extent do we amplify some and reduce the others? So, but in our case, I think it was a bit easy because Kenya's curriculum was undergoing reform. So at least we were able to see that there are aspects of media information literacy, although not by name, but in terms of description, that were in the new curriculum recommendation. So it was easy to get the aspect of the UNESCO curriculum and input them into the new curriculum as a university in Kenya. But it's still a work in progress because that was done using the previous UNESCO media curriculum. So the new one, we will have to update the other one as time goes by. Thank you.
Sorry, something happened on my screen. Thank you. Remember, all the others who are listening, that if you have any questions to Wallis, you may be able to leave them to the chat box. I was thinking about. I'm still thinking about the local conditions and the localities. One thing that media education is always bound to is the language. And if you think about the linguistic resources, I guess all African countries are in the situation that there are quite many languages spoken parallelly in the countries, right? And it struck me that I recently read the linguistic researcher Busi Makoni, that she stated that also language is a cultural construction, that previously the colonial language ideology has been imposed on very diversified local practices, where different languages may not have been distinguished as pure categories from each other. They have been communicative resources, but then in the colonial time they have been like categorized more and seen some language more important than the other. But how do you arrange media education to the whole country in terms of the linguistic variation in Kenya? Could you tell a bit about that?
So I think it's a bit easy in Kenya because maybe not in practice, but in terms of media education, it's standard. The language, official language of instruction in the country, from primary school all the way to university, is English. So even people who speak a lot of English in Kenya are regarded as the best educated. But we have seen in practice now, after leaving the schools of journalism and media training, rather, the practice demands otherwise, because you have to speak to the population in their language, that is Kiswahili. We have also seen that there is a proliferation of community and local media, where there are so many local contexts, and now we have a lot of vernacular. Let me not use that term. I think local languages, media which is broadcast in local languages, both electronic, especially electronic media, that is radio and TV. So basically, the issue of language in terms of training is not in dispute at all. It's English all through, but in practice of journalism, is a mixed trade. For the legacy media, it's English and Kiswahili, the national language, and English the official language, and Kiswahili the national language, and then there are other local media that broadcast in local languages, and there are hundreds of them.
Okay, thank you. One final question. What resources do you see that the Kenyan school teachers need the most when it comes to media and information literacy education?
Great. Thank you so much. I think they have no resource at the moment, because even the curriculum that was developed was quite skeleton. So there is need for some instructional materials. Instructional materials in the sense that from that curriculum, there is need for actually books at different levels to show them what is media and information literacy, and to actually enable them instruct their students on media and information literacy. So they are not a resource at all, and that's a serious gap. Even if they are exposed to it, that's a gap that needs to be filled as we teach the teachers in the colleges now. They need the instructional materials to take to the students, because that is the end product that we intend to have.
Okay, thank you, Wallace. Now I guess we have to go further. We thank you, and let us introduce our next speaker. Now we'll switch from Kenya to South Africa, another country. And our speaker is Admire Mare, who is an associate professor in the Department of Communication and Media at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. And previously he was working in Namibia, in Windhoek. His research interests include, for example, analyzing the intersection between technology and society and digital journalism, social media and politics. And he currently leads an international research project related to this: social media, misinformation and elections in Kenya and Zimbabwe. So please, Admire Mare, it's your turn. And now we go to South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you can see me. The weather's just changed here, so it's even the lighting system, it's not even working at all, but it's fine. My name is Admire. Thanks, Marit, and also thanks to the organizers of this particular event for inviting us to speak on our own reflections. I want to speak here as a researcher, but I also want to speak as somebody who was recently involved in an attempt to localize the Unesco model curricula around meal in Namibia. And also as a trainer, I also trained almost 400 youth in Namibia as part of the Unesco Japanese Embassy collaborative project on meal in Namibia. So I'll speak from those three particular heads. But I just want to emphasize one thing maybe before I start, that yes, meal is a work in progress, is what Wallace has pointed out. In Africa, it is a work in progress. But again, as a work in progress, one thing that we need to know is that we can know it is also coming from the global north and coming down to the global south. It's more like, media development kind of initiatives. That's how it's transplanted to the African context. And because of that, already demonstrates that there are certain kinds of pedagogies, approaches, methods that are also being transplanted to Africa. And in as much as we have got the room to localize and contextualize some of these models, there are also limitations in terms of how we can go about it. For example, I think Mariti have talked about the issue of language. How do we translate some of these concepts that are, very peculiar to me, to our own local languages and still remain speaking the same language? And I think that's very important to just have at the back of our mind, or the challenges that we have when we are trying to deal with these particular issues in the global south. But also the other issue that I also want to say is that when you look at the ecosystem of meal ecosystem, the actors, who are the stakeholders in this ecosystem? Yes, I think as we have seen with what Wallace was talking about, we are seeing ministries of education, ministries of basic education, sometimes ministry of higher education. Sometimes we are also seeing UNESCO playing a very big part. We are seeing non-governmental organizations, but we are also increasingly seeing fact-checking organizations occupying this particular space. And I think for me, that is very important. When you see fact-checking organizations like Africa Check, PESA Check, ZimFact, NAMFact, Namibia Fact Check, getting into this ecosystem, what does it mean for the evolution and also the direction in which new projects are going to take going forward? But over and above that, we are also seeing the entrance of big tech driven and funded initiatives around meal. For example, I know Facebook has been very instrumental, now called Meta. They've been very instrumental in terms of pushing out these kinds of narratives, and also Google to some extent. We're also seeing TikTok increasingly in Southern Africa coming into the ecosystem. What does that tell us in terms of the entrance of these big tech companies in the meal setup, as it were? So for me, these are issues that we really need to unpack. What are the interests? What are their geopolitical, if we have to use that, but also political economic interests in these kinds of spaces? What are they trying to push? Are they trying to use this as a way to push back against regulation of social media companies? What are they using it as a launchpad for? And I think that's one thing that I just want to emphasize, which I have seen very coming to light over the last couple of years. But over and above that, I think Wallace also talked about the issue of copy and pasting. We have seen a lot of copy and pasting, where in some instances the UNESCO curriculum model is not really localized and contextualized to us. So it's pretty much cutting and pasting. So you take the Accra model, as it is, presented in that, and you just run with it. But does it speak to the contextual and peculiar, surroundings in which that particular model is being used? What are the challenges? What are the issues? What are the peculiar issues that are relevant to the African audiences and citizens that we really need to unpack when we are introducing the concept like meal in an African context? And I think for me, that's something that's very, very important. But over and above that, as I have already pointed out, what are the uniquely African pedagogies that can actually be pushed forward to make meal become very relevant to our audiences? And I think that's where a lot of research and a lot of effort should really be channeled towards, because if we can actually be able to push that kind of thing, then it can then be able to have resonances with our audiences, or resonances with the students that we intend to empower through meal initiatives. Otherwise, if we don't do that, if we reproduce the same kinds of pedagogies that we have used in the classroom or outside of the classroom, and assume that similar kinds of initiatives or pedagogies are likely to drive the message home, I think we may not probably be able to achieve as much as we probably need to, we are likely to be able to see. Let me just reflect on the issue of contextualizing this model curriculum, the UNESCO model curriculum. As a model curriculum, obviously, you can't expect it to have an equal share of various cultures, because we are talking about the whole world, and the whole world is made up of so many countries, so many cultures, so many languages. And obviously, it's a daunting task on anybody's part to actually be able to customize such kind of a big global model curriculum to speak to these diverse cultures, diverse countries, and diverse linguistic groups. It's very difficult, obviously it is. But over and above that, one thing that we often push, especially when we're trying to talk about de-Westernization and the decolonial approach to these things, is to say whose ideas and whose whose ways of knowing or whose ways of doing meal initiatives are being promoted through these kinds of initiatives or these model curriculums. And I think that's where we begin to unpack issues related to the de-Westernizing or de-Westernization as a concept. To say, what is it that we want to de-Westernize? Do we want to what should be de-Westernized? Is it about approaches to conducting meal initiatives? Is it the subject matter that constitutes what we call meal, or is it the research agenda around it? What exactly needs to be decolonized? And I think I'm trying to flag out these issues just to open up the debate so that people begin to see where some of the challenges are going forward. Because from the global south, when we speak about trying to decolonize, in some cases, obviously, it's about disrupting the center, or it's about making sure that the global south becomes a locus of enunciation, where we can also see their ways or their knowledges becoming equally treated as equally valid and relevant in the global discourse of knowledge making and also knowledge creation. And I think for me, the sooner and the better when we realize that we need to realize that Western ways of doing things are a starting point, but that they are not the alpha and omega of doing meal initiatives. Then we begin to have a conversation. Because it is only at that point in time, that's when we begin to open up a dialogue where we say, in as much as what has been proposed from a Western perspective says this and that, but it is only a partial way of looking at it. It's a partial way of opening up this black box of what we call meal. Beyond that, there are other ways of doing meal. There are other ways of imagining meal. There are also other ways of actually proposing various ways in which meal initiatives can actually be promoted in Africa. And I think when we begin to do that, we begin to have a different kind of a dialogue and different kind of a conversation that can probably lead us to a much more broader, much more open-ended, but also a much more cosmopolitan approach to meal initiatives. That's what I would probably say. I think I want to stop there because I don't want to end up monopolizing the platform, but rather just I've raised these issues just to open up the discussion, but also to just push us a little bit further to begin to see what is possible and what is not possible. Thank you so much, Marit, for the platform.
Thank you, Admire. Very interesting, fascinating insights related to contextualizing, de-Westernizing or Africanizing things. And I was thinking of media educators, mill educators and researchers as some sorts of cultural translators when listening to you, that they really have to recognize that, okay, there's this global discourse or this Western discourse, and we have to find ways how not only to do things top down because it lands through governments and international, often Western aided organizations to into the local, it's transplanted into the local conditions, but you also have to find ways how to nurture bottom-up approaches and how to make the local contribution. And I can understand that this is not always easy. It requires a lot of translation work. Do you have any concrete ideas if we take a mill education into classroom, for example, how school teachers can do that? How we should, or how you should support school teachers in building the distinctly African way of doing mill? Are there any quick fixes? There might not be any quick fixes, but yeah,
I know. Thanks, Marit. I'll probably offhand right now, probably I may not have one to put to the table. But I always believe that, you know, every African culture has got its own ways in which they trained and initiated people or the next citizens in a cultural group ways of doing things. And I think these uniquely African and uniquely cultural ways of doing things are still very much relevant if we really need to make sure that male initiatives can actually be anchored in our grassroots communities. That way, we don't just rely on the knower and on the teacher and the student. Somebody who is assumed to know and the other one who is assumed not to know is probably most the way in which we have organized teaching generally in the classroom. It's always that kind of a hierarchical kind of setup. But I think uniquely African, in as much as they are also hierarchical, there are also other ways in which even the one who is assumed to be the student also comes in as a knower. And I think always is somebody who can actually teach even the teacher. And I think those kinds of issues are really, I think, are important. And I think going back and try to excavate some of these uniquely African pedagogies in the way in which we initiated maybe boys into men, girls into women, and all these kinds of things. There are ways in which we can always harness the power of culturally specific pedagogies that we're always there that can actually be able to help us to move forward. That's what I would say.
Yes, but Job Allen sorry, I'm not able to pronounce the names, but here's a participant who puts forward a very important remark, I think, about the commercial culture and the pressure of commercial culture, which is very westernized. For example, in fashion and movie industries, the Western value are very Western value laden. So what to do if they are the main sources of media news, he asks. How to push the genuinely African content instead of just looking at or letting the Western media culture to influence too much. Maybe that was, yeah, there are no quick fixes there neither, but as Job Allen says, the de-Westernizing perspective is a current and interesting debate in media studies as well, and has a lot to do with the media culture that has globalized and that has a significant influence on media educators as well. I think networking, capacity building, connecting to each other is really needed to find what is the uniquely local and African perspective and approach. So we thank you, Admire, very much. And there are many participants in the chat box also writing their thanks about these inspirational words and insightful perspectives. So thank you. And it's time to go to a third country. Namely, we will discuss media literacy in the context of Nigeria. And our third speaker is Chido Onuma, who is a journalist, rights activist, and an author. He holds a PhD in communication and journalism from Spain, and he's the coordinator of the African Center for Media and Information Literacy, AFRICMIL, in Abuja, Nigeria. And he has worked as a journalist both internationally and in Africa, for example, helping journalists in West Africa as well as the Caribbean to report on issues that are frequently underreported or misreported. So a very extensive international journalistic background. You are very welcome, Chido Onuma, and to share your perspectives from the Nigerian perspective. Is Chido here? It seems that we are not able to find Chido. Maybe he has some technical problems right now. I know that he's also located in the US right now, so there's a time difference It's an early morning for him, so maybe we will go further and take a short look at the Afromedia network platform instead, while still waiting Chido to pop in. Because today, before this webinar, we had a pre-launch event for a new digital platform that is designed specifically for African media researchers. And it's provided by Nordicom, which currently runs same kind of a digital platform for Nordic media researchers in collaboration with a Norwegian university called the NLA University College and 3 African universities. And my colleague Knut Risnes, who is the managing editor of Nord Media Network and a research officer at Nordicom, will now present the platform. Varsågod. That is.
Thank you very much. I should start to say that I've only been in the development of this site. I've only been supporting Actor, and the real people who have been working and developing all of this is, of course, Elva and project leader Terje. Those who were with us from the beginning today also have the chance of listening to the wise words of Monica, who were able to put this initiative in a very good perspective. And with that in mind, I'll give a quick briefing on Afromedia from my perspective, which is from Nord Media. I'm working with Nordic media research collaboration. It is presented from the base or skeleton of Nord Media, and the idea is very shortly briefed here on the front page. It is to assist the African media and communication research to stay updated and informed about, one, their peers, these active scholars, and the current research and events. And this is done in different ways. One thing is active scholars. It's possible to create a profile on this website. I'm sure somebody can post a link in the chat again, where one registers one's competence, etc., etc., and you create a profile which is available to your peers, both in Africa and elsewhere. It's also a site where one can get an idea about current research and events. The current research is often can be presented in both highlight form, which is a shorter version, but also in longer featuring articles. There are a couple of examples online already. In Nord Media, which I am responsible for, we use featured articles for example, portrait interviews and also project presentations, and we try to compile, for example, similar projects at the same time working in the same area, and present them to both inform and inspire. Highlights are often used to present events, especially the National Researcher Conference, important in the Nordics, but it's also possible to present them in this upcoming conference. In Nord Media, and probably also later, Afromedia is heavily dependent on input from the researcher community themselves, and conferences happening. It's conferences, webinars, seminars. And it's support to support. It's also static resources. Some of you have already seen us going through the static resources. And so I won't do exactly that, that again. That being said, it will happen. It's necessary that it happens with a base in Africa and the African resources. It's the Nordic countries and Europe. It's different. It's a different context. It's different expectations, and we always get input from the communities we serve. And I really hope that the African research community will come with the input, their ideas, their everybody's needs on what one can find and how to use this sort of a platform such as this. And on this website, as many others, I believe it's only the technicalities that will eventually set the final breaks and possibilities of everything. And as Terje and Elva and mentioned earlier, it's possible to send input and ideas to either Terje's email or the editors at Nord Media, which for now functions as a mailbox for both communities until everything is up and running. In our defense, this page was launched at about 90 minutes ago. It went online, so it's still some things. And if anybody has any questions, I am happy to let Terje and Elva answer for them, who are in fact the project owners of this tool, which the website also is.
Would you, Terje, like to very briefly comment on the site?
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm very happy to do. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Yes, of course. I'm very glad to promote the site, and thanks again for the opportunity in connection with the webinar. I think what is important to say is that we truly depend on each and every researcher to actually register with the site, and so the site is only efficient to the extent that the research community actually will support it. So we will depend on that, but we will use the opportunities in the next coming months and years actually to promote the site among all African media research environments. And we will try to actively promote it at the different regional conferences that are going on. So you will definitely hear about it later. But just like Knut already said, we are very happy to get feedback on the site. At the same time, we need to make the site in such a way that it is manageable. What I mean is that if it is too ambitious, and there are different examples of that where such initiatives have become too ambitious, and after a while it's difficult to keep it going. So we are trying to make it manageable. We are trying to make it in such a way that when our researcher signs up, the information can stay there for not just a month or two, but actually for years without needed to be updated. So each researcher will have a chance to put in the main publications, their photo and research interests, and that will be relevant for quite some time in the future. But thanks again for giving us this opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Terje. Yes, it's crucial that researchers themselves provide the content and are engaged and want to share what's happening in the research fields, and that's also the case for Nord Media Network. But now that we have referred quite many times for the capacity building and the networking and the importance of being connected to each other, I think this comes very timely and can become a very useful resource in the African continent. Where I myself, I have been trying to find some African colleagues for different research projects during the recent latest weeks. So during the past weeks, so I have realized that it's very difficult to get touch into African researchers because they may not have these common forums. So we hope that this forum will be run by the locals and owned by the locals, and of course we will then be able to collaborate and support you in future as well. But this will become a genuinely unique African initiative. So thank you. And now I have to inform you that we weren't able to reach Guido today. I'm sorry for that. We missed him. But please take a look at Terje's article on Nord Media Network about the Afromedia Network site. And I also want to make you aware of current call for papers. That's for the UNESCO MILID yearbook, because we are talking about media and information literacy. So you may know that UNESCO has been publishing a yearbook where practitioners and researchers of media and information literacy are brought together to address some ongoing projects or recent MIL initiatives, to reflect upon experiences and report research results. And this, the yearbook 2021 is finally out, and it will be represented in May at the UNESCO Higher Education Conference in Barcelona on the 18th to 20th of May. And now we are already working on the next MILID yearbook 2023. They will be published biannually in future. This was an initiative launched by Nordicom or in collaboration with the MILID University Network partners in 2011, I think, and the first yearbooks were published by Nordicom, but now the yearbooks are published by a university in Colombia. Yes, so I think it's time to wrap up, and thank you for your attention. And this is only the starting point for collaboration and exchange of ideas. So I hope you got inspired, and we'll definitely get back to the Afromedia Network site. The official launch will be held in August, so please keep an eye on both Nord Media Network and other websites. Next, in our next webinar, we will turn to another direction, namely to Japan. It will be at the end of May. So all the information is available at Nordicom and Nord Media Network's site under collaborations and webinars. So there you can find our webinar catalog. And in future, if you have any ideas related to the Nordic countries, you might be able to or be willing to collaborate also in terms of webinars with us. And I'm really looking forward to, for example, co-arranging webinars with the newly established Afromedia Network in future. So thank you, and let's keep in touch. Have a nice day.